The Orioles had their chance to acquire Garrett Crochet this offseason, but instead, he was traded to the Red Sox. And on Wednesday night, the Orioles saw up close and personal what they're missing out on. I'll recap the loss coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, April 3rd, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 3-0 loss to the Boston Red Sox on Wednesday night. Get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including a quiet night for the Orioles offense, a solid start for Zach Eflin, and some nasty stuff coming out of that Orioles bullpen. Then we'll talk a bit about Garrett Crochet, who dominated the Orioles over 8 scoreless innings on Wednesday, while the Orioles could have had him this offseason, and why they at least somewhat opted not to. And then finally, some updates from Triple-A Norfolk, including how close Gunnar Henderson is to being ready to be activated to the big league roster. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. Before we get there, though, just did want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms. Make sure to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and a review, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. And we're here on YouTube as well. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Leave your comments about the show, about the team in the comments section here. And if you want to talk some ball, Orioles questions, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. So let's jump into it. The Orioles have alternated win and loss every other day so far for the first 6 games of this 2025 season. And Wednesday was the first time they've been shut out this year. Final score from Memorial Park at Camden Yards on Wednesday evening is the Boston Red Sox 3 and the Orioles nothing in game 2 of a 3-game set. Orioles now 3-3 through 6 games this season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles shutout loss. And the first thing you need to know is, well, pretty simple. The Orioles offense really did not do anything on Wednesday night. It certainly wasn't their worst offensive performance. And to be honest with you, there were some good swings, even against Garrett Crochet, who dominated, but 4 hits, 2 walks, all the hits were singles. When you only muster that, is really, really hard to win baseball games, and the Orioles learned that on Wednesday, and much of that was Garrett Crochet, who went 8 scoreless in this game. We're going to talk about him a little bit later in the second segment, but he was dominant, was Crochet. In this one, the O's just couldn't solve him. They only ended up with 1 chance with a runner in scoring position. They had only 1 leadoff batter on in the entirety of the 9 innings. It was a Ramon Laureano leadoff single in the 8th. That was the only time they did that. I mean, Cedric Mullins grounded into a double play. He did that only once in all of 2024. The O's just didn't have it. And some of it is the Orioles. Some of it is just how good Crochet is. Now, they did start to see him well in the 6th inning. They were trailing 3-0 at that point. Jordan Westburg smoked a ball at 108. Adley hit a long fly ball that, even with the left field wall pulled in, still wasn't long enough. Would have been a home run in 6 of 30 ballparks. Tyler O'Neill crushed a ball at 105 to left center. Would have actually been a home run in 1 of 30 ballparks. I'm assuming Wrigley Field, but unsure there. But they squared him up in the 6th. Even in the 7th, Gary Sanchez hit a ball well. Ramon Laureano smoked a single to lead off the 8th. They started to see him better later in the game, which you would hope would happen. You start to see him the 3rd time through the order. It is a real penalty against starting pitchers. They get worse and worse as they get to the 3rd time through the order, but his stuff was just so good. They couldn't rally anything together. Their hard hit balls, unfortunately, turned into outs. And at the end of the day, when they got Crochet out of the game, they looked up and it was 3-0 in the 9th inning. He's so good, Garrett Crochet, and we will get to him a little bit later. But the second thing you need to know is that may have been, I'm still not convinced it will be, although I'm pushing for this, that may have been the final time we see Jorge Mateo in an Orioles uniform. Mateo got the start at shortstop with Jackson Holliday out of the lineup against the lefty on Wednesday night. He goes 0 for 3, made kind of a high, bad throw home on a relay on a bang-bang play that was the play that the Red Sox scored their third run in the fifth inning against Zach Eflin. And yeah, that's probably nitpicking a little bit, but when you're on the roster bubble, you got to make a better throw than that. They always had a chance for a relay to get it out at the plate, which could have changed this game a little bit. Not that they scored anyway, but could have kept it a little bit closer. And instead, his at-bats weren't super, super competitive against the lefty. He goes 0 for 3, still without a hit this season. Gunnar Henderson may be ready here on Thursday. At worst, it looks like Gunnar's going to be ready to be activated from the IL on Friday when the Orioles go to Kansas City. And with the O's facing a righty in Tanner Houck on Thursday, I mean, Mateo's not going to start and probably won't play either way. So whether it's Gunnar or Thursday or Friday, if the roster move decision is to DFA Jorge Mateo, this could be it. Now, I broke down this entire decision on Wednesday's episode. So if you haven't checked that one out, make sure to go back and do just that. I talked about how I would DFA Jorge Mateo. Just think at the point, it's past due. Like, he's run his course on this roster. However, what I think the O's will do now that Colton Cowser is on the injured list is just option Dylan Carlson back to Triple-A, activate Gunnar, and keep Mateo on the roster for now. But I have to think it's at least a possibility the Orioles are considering that Mateo might meet his fate when that roster move comes. The third thing you need to know from this one is Ramon Laureano really had his first Oriole moment. O's brought him in on a 1-year, $5 million deal for the veteran outfielder to provide some depth and some hitting against lefties. So, of course, he starts again, made his first Oriole start on Monday against the lefty Connor Newcomb, had an offer in that one, but came up with his first Oriole hit in his first at-bat on Wednesday. Pretty hard hit single off Crochet in the second inning was actually the Orioles' first hit in this game. That ended up being his only hit, but what he also showed us as he was getting the start in left field on Wednesday night was really the trademark skill of Ramon Laureano for his entire career, but specifically right now when he's not the hitter he once was, and he's more of a backup player when in the past he had been a starting type outfielder with the Athletics. It's one of the best and strongest throwing arms in all of baseball, and he showed it off on Wednesday. I mean, the fact that Trevor Story hit a ground ball past shortstop into left center field. Trevor Story has solid speed, but the fact that he thought it was going to be a good idea to try and stretch that kind of hit from a single into a double off Ramon Laureano, who threw him out by like 5 feet. Perfect throw to second, tag is down, Story's out at second base for the second out of the inning. And that wasn't even one of the more impressive throws of Laureano's career. That was pretty basic, but with his arm being so good, he could field a ball, get up, and just throw a laser to second base and turn it into an easy out. Again, maybe just some terrible decision-making and base running from Trevor Story. Maybe he thought Mullins, who has a much weaker arm, was actually going to pick up that ball, even though it was much closer to Laureano and it was his ball to go get, which he did. But it's just cool to have a guy on this team that has those tools. And Cowser has a great arm as well. And the O's are going to miss him for about 2 months now. And Laureano, at least against lefties, can really fill in there. We know, Santander had a great arm. He's gone, but Tyler O'Neill also has a great throwing arm. And when you have an outfield like that with Laureano and O'Neill, and even Kjerstad has a good arm when he's out there as well, it makes it a lot easier when you have Cedric Mullins and his one downfall defensively is his throwing arm when he's in center. When you have those great arms in the corners around him, basically at all times, it makes it even easier to have Cedric's one drawback out there in center field. Fourth thing you need to know from this Orioles loss on Wednesday is that Zach Eflin was just kind of solid. He put up a quality start. It wasn't the best start of his career. It wasn't the worst start of his career. He was fine. 6 innings of 3-run ball on 8 hits, 5 Ks, no walks, and a home run on 87 pitches. Now, the Red Sox certainly hit him hard, but Zach Eflin did his classic pitch to contact, limit damage, get through at least 6 innings, keep his team in the game. That's what you have Zach Eflin for. That is exactly what he did on opening day, although he was certainly better on opening day. That's exactly what he did here. You start with no walks. That is the telltale sign of a Zach Eflin start. He gave up the solo homer to Trevor Story, and then that was in the second, then just got into a little trouble in that 2-run 5th inning where the Red Sox put some hits together. He made a couple of bad pitches. He had it 0-2 on Cedric Rafaela, a guy who is willing to swing at any breaking ball outside the strike zone. And Eflin's sweeper and curveball had both been really good. And he tried to go up with a fastball, which I'm fine with. Like, Rafaela will chase up there too, but you got to get it out of the strike zone. And Eflin actually left it in the zone where if he would have taken it, it would have been a called strike 3. But Rafaela is able to line it into center field for an RBI single. And then even though Rafael Devers had been hitless through the first 5 games of the year, you cannot throw a sweeper from a righty to the lefty middle. Devers is going to handle that. He smokes it into the corner. The Orioles relay was a little bit off, and the runner scores from first to make it a 3-0 game. And it's just those little misses that he had. I thought overall he was good. He got whiffs, at least one of them, on all 6 of his pitches. That was pretty impressive. It was a big mix. The cutter he threw 26 times, and then every other pitch he threw between 8 and 17 times. So he was going to all 6 offerings at times in this game. They all got swings and misses. They all got called strikes. His command was on point. His velocity was a little bit down, but it's okay when you're Zach Eflin and you're still early in the season as well. I just really liked what I saw from the stuff, even with the velo a little bit down. And it was just a couple of misses on a couple of pitches in that 5th inning that got him in trouble. And if the Orioles had a better offensive day, if you get 6 innings and 3 runs from Zach Eflin and a good performance from the bullpen, you're feeling good. It's just that the Orioles literally did not score. And I think that makes the start look a little worse, where I thought Eflin was pretty good. And hey, the Orioles have played 6 games, and the best 2 starts so far from their starting pitching staff, at least, have gone to Zach Eflin. And really the swing and miss was more than we're used to. He got 15 whiffs in this game. Only once with the Orioles last year did Eflin get at least 15 whiffs. He got 18 of them in a start in September of last year in Colorado. It was that first start after he came off that quick IL stint late last year. That was the only time after the trade to the O's that he had 15 or more whiffs, and he only did it once with the Rays last year before the trade in 2024. So not a usual thing in terms of swing and miss volume from Zach Eflin. I just thought the stuff was playing really well, and excited to see his next start. You all know how much I love to watch Zach Eflin pitch. It's fun to see him go out there. And then the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 3-0 loss to the Red Sox on Wednesday night is that the bullpen after Eflin was super nasty. Bryan Baker came in the 7th. This is a different Bryan Baker. I could be proven wrong again by Bryan Baker. I was the guy who stayed on him the longest, even as he was struggling throughout the 2023 season. I was like, this stuff is just so good. He is back with that stuff. 1-2-3 with a strikeout on a filthy version of his new changeup. The surprising part was Baker threw 16 pitches in that 1-2-3 7th. 11 of the 16 pitches were sliders. Across the board, the slider has generally been the number 2 and most of the time the number 3 pitch of the fastball changeup slider in Baker's arsenal throughout his Orioles career. And I looked it up, 11 out of 16 percentage-wise. That is the highest percentage of sliders Baker has ever thrown in a single outing, of an outing where he threw at least 10 pitches. So any outing that's anywhere close to being like a full inning out of the bullpen, highest percentage of sliders ever. So he clearly had a good feel for that pitch on Wednesday. He went to it. That's the pitch I'm always least impressed by from Bryan Baker, but it was really, really working on Wednesday. And then Gregory Soto did give up 2 hits in the 8th, but he also struck out the side and put up a 0. His stuff was filthy. Sinker. I mean, he threw a 4-seamer that Alex Bregman swung and missed on for strike 3 that was at 97, but looked like it was right down the middle. But because Soto throws so many sinkers, he only threw, I think, 2 or 3 4-seamers in this game, but one of them was the pitch to Bregman. And you look at Alex Bregman, you're like, Alex Bregman, how are you swinging and missing at a fastball right down the middle? Well, it's because he thinks it's going to be a sinker and sink. Instead, it's a 4-seamer, stays on plane, and Bregman swings right under it for strike 3. That is a big weapon for Soto. His slider was also crazy nasty in this game. I am loving what the Orioles bullpen is looking like, really, except for Cionel Perez, who looked terrible in the 9th inning. Somehow he got a huge double play and escaped by actually putting up a 0 in that 9th to keep it at 3-0. It's his first 0 of the season so far. Now, it wasn't pretty. He walked the bases loaded. He threw 31 pitches. He walked Ceddanne Rafaela on 4 pitches. He is maybe the biggest free swinger in baseball. He's basically mini Javier Baez. Ceddanne Rafaela, shout out to Kevin Brown on the broadcast for bringing this one up. Ceddanne Rafaela had not walked since August 9th of last year. An MLB current record, 160 consecutive plate appearances without a walk, and Perez walked him on 4 pitches to load the bases in the 9th inning. He's lucky he got that ground ball double play. He has looked really bad in the first 3 outings. Hopefully Perez can turn it around, or he is going to be on thin ice. But no matter what the pitching staff was doing, when you get 0 runs from your offense, I guarantee you are not going to win games. And that is what happened to the Orioles in the loss on Wednesday. And the reason why, at least the biggest reason why they didn't score, is because Garrett Crochet was on the mound on the other side, and he was filthy. He was also available to a lot of teams, including the Orioles this offseason. Instead, he went to a division rival. We'll kind of talk about Crochet's dominance and that process coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That is where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. You can stop just managing your money, start really building wealth. So the best part about Monarch Money at times can be the convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And managing your money with your partner is even smoother than ever. As I've talked about, I got married last year. Managing money with a partner is a big part of that. And you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONMLB for half off that first year. So let's talk about Garrett Crochet. He was on the mound for the Red Sox on Wednesday night, and he dominated the Orioles. The final line in what I would call the best start of his career: 8 scoreless innings, 4 hits, 8 Ks, 1 walk, 102 pitches, just 6 hard hit balls by the Orioles offense. 8 innings, longest start of his career. He had never gone beyond 7 in the major leagues. 102 pitches, second most he had ever thrown. 103 was his previous high. He was fantastic. He had all the offerings working. 4-seamer, 95 to 98. Cutter was getting swings and misses all over the place. Changeup was really good to righties. They could not figure it out. Tossed in the sinker and the sweeper lightly when he needed them. It's just, it's a cutter at 90 to 93. It's a 4-seamer up to 98. It's ridiculous stuff. That big leg kick motion. He's nasty. He is absolutely nasty. And he was still throwing 96 when he was out there in the 8th inning. He had never pitched into the 8th inning in the big leagues. And as we know, Garrett Crochet was on the trade block this offseason. He had been with the White Sox. They were looking to trade him at last year's deadline, didn't end up moving him. It was pretty well known the White Sox were going to move him this offseason. He had 2 years of control left, was set to be a free agent after 2026. He really wanted to sign a contract extension with any team that traded for him. And the Orioles talked with the White Sox. We know that. They were in discussions with Chicago on potential Garrett Crochet deals, and it didn't end up working out. We know that because he was traded to another team, and that was the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox went all in this offseason with their biggest move being Garrett Crochet. And on December 11th, the Red Sox sent 4 pretty highly rated prospects to Chicago for Crochet. It was Kyle Teal, the Red Sox number 3 prospect, a 50 value catcher, top 50 prospect in baseball. It was Braden Montgomery, the Red Sox first round pick, an outfielder in 2024. It was Chase Mydroth, a top 20 prospect in the Red Sox system, an infielder. And it was Wickham Gonzalez, another top 15 prospect in the Red Sox system, a right-handed pitcher. It was a lot that they gave up. And when this trade was made back in December, I broke it down on an episode of this show and kind of gave out what my Orioles equivalent of that deal would have been. Like, if the White Sox were trying to get equal value, what would the Orioles had to have given up? And really, it's value that has to beat that trade if that was the offer from the Red Sox for the Orioles to be able to get Garrett Crochet. And my equivalent was Kobe Mayo, outfielder Vance Honeycutt, outfielder Dylan Beavers, and right-handed pitcher Juan Nunez. And I said, even that felt a little light, and you have to beat the Red Sox offer. So you're probably adding in some cash and at least another prospect in that deal. So 5 players total from the Orioles side to get that done. Maybe a lower level kind of lottery ticket, kind of interesting pitching arm that's, maybe come through Delmarva or something would maybe be one more name I would add to that to try and get the White Sox to pull the trigger on that deal. And I asked the question back in December, if it were Mayo, Nunez, Beavers, Honeycutt, maybe one more lower level prospect, would you give that up for Garrett Crochet? If the Orioles knew that could beat the Red Sox offer, would you give that up? And at this point, after seeing him last night, let me know in the comment section. Would you give that much up with Kobe Mayo and Vance Honeycutt as the headliners to go and get Garrett Crochet? I got some mixed results. And, he was only going to have 2 years of team control left. Now, the Red Sox changed that this week. They gave him a 6-year, $170 million extension. He'll get about $28 million per year to be the ace of this Red Sox staff for years to come. And maybe the Orioles didn't want to give up on that much talent. Guys like Beavers and Honeycutt and Kobe Mayo, the number 2 prospect in their system. Maybe they were worried about Garrett Crochet's injury history, right? He came up quickly as a relief pitcher, then got Tommy John. Then the White Sox didn't really stretch him out much for the entire second half of the 2024 season. They were really just trying to keep him healthy to make sure he'd have high value and they could trade him for a lot of pieces in the offseason, which is exactly what they did when they dealt him to Boston in December. And maybe the Orioles were worried about that injury history, thinking he won't hold up. He's never really had a true full season as a starting pitcher. And they're like, are we really going to give up this much for a guy who's never done that? And I understand that line of thinking, but this team was and is without an ace. And there were talks with the Dylan Ceases and the Michael Kings of the world and the Luis Castillos and the Pablo Lopez's and the Garrett Crochets and all those guys out there. And there's still guys like Sandy Alcantara potentially out there for the Orioles to go get, but they lost Corbin Burns to Arizona and really did not replace him in that rotation. That was, I would say, the key storyline for this Orioles offseason was not replacing Burns and getting a number one for the top of their rotation. And then they suffer the Grayson Rodriguez injury and they bring in the veterans, and the rotation is very clearly the weakest link on this team right now. We knew that going into the year, and it's been the case through 6 games right now. They've gotten, I'd say, 2 good starts, and they have both come from their kind of de facto ace of Zach Eflin. The other 4 guys struggled in different ways in each of their first starts of the season, and hopefully that was just some early rust, and they continue to pitch better as the season goes on. But this team is without an ace. And you can argue if you would have given up that much or more, or if the Orioles would have even been able or wanted to extend him, and maybe that was part of it. You can argue, is he going to hold up? And maybe this deal won't look good long-term. Maybe Crochet will not be able to stay as a starter. He'll have to be moved to the bullpen, or he will be one of the highest paid relievers in baseball, or he gets hurt again, and that's all possible. I mean, he's a pitcher, so all of that is possible. We know how pitchers go down in Major League Baseball. But the Orioles are without an ace. And they saw one up close and personal on Wednesday, and he dominated them. And they're going to see him again, probably multiple times, with the Red Sox being in their division. And Crochet, I don't want to say he was out there for the taking, because there were 10, 12 teams probably talking with the White Sox to try and get this guy. That's how good at least he has been. But even with a somewhat depleted farm system, the Orioles probably had the horses to make that deal with Chicago. And potentially, you never know, right? They didn't really have a top catcher to give up. They weren't going to give up a Sayo. Red Sox were able to give up Kyle Teal. Maybe that's exactly what the White Sox were looking for, and the Orioles just weren't willing to offer up Pistachios, which I'm totally on board with. I think he's going to be a generational hitter for the Orioles, maybe even starting this season. But that guy was out there. The Orioles were in talks. A division rival got him that also needed an ace, and they are reaping the benefits right now, and the Orioles are on the opposite end of that, as we saw on Wednesday. So it's something to think about as this season goes along. I think this is still a good Orioles team. I think this is still a playoff team, even without upgrades to this rotation. But we got to see what could have been in Baltimore had they made another trade similar to getting Burns last year. That's what the O's could have had atop this rotation. And for a multitude of reasons, they did not do it. Not saying it's right or wrong for at least Crochet specifically being the ace they added. But the O's are going to see that, and they're going to have to live with that for now 7+ years, as Crochet signed that extension this week as well. But final thing I wanted to get to, just some updates from Triple-A Norfolk as their season began as well. That's coming up next to finish off the show. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats. They'll keep you feeling fuller longer. Now, I'm a big fan of the classic pistachios with the shell in there. I just love cracking open that shell and getting to a delicious pistachio, but many people love the no shells variety. And I gotta say, those are pretty good too. There's some fantastic flavors, and the no shells make it the perfect snack for on the go. Quite honestly, you really can't go wrong with Wonderful Pistachios as that go-to snack. So get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So just wanted to finish things off today on a Thursday episode with an update from Triple-A. Orioles had opening day on Thursday. Triple-A Norfolk Tides had opening day on Friday night. We had some just interesting players and stat lines to talk about a little bit as to get you updated on especially some guys who could help out the Orioles at some point this year. And of course, we got to start with the best player in AAA right now. That is Gunnar Henderson, who is on a rehab assignment trying to come back from that mild intercostal strain that he suffered in spring training. He is eligible to come off the injured list today. And all Brandon Hyde's been saying so far this week is that they're looking at activating him this week. And Gunnar, he's looked ready in AAA. 4 out of the 5 games they've played, he started at shortstop. 1 was at DH, made a great diving catch on Wednesday night at short. He looks healthy out there. In the 5 games, he got 9 hard hit balls overall, hit a 3-run homer on Sunday to left center field, then a monster towering poolside shot for a solo shot on Tuesday that was measured at 112.2 off the bat. It was only marked at 401 feet. It hit off a light pole and bounced back. It looked a lot more like 501 feet watching the video on Tuesday. He looks absolutely ready. Now, he is eligible to come off the injured list on Thursday, and I think he will be ready. The only issue with that is that Norfolk played a night game on Wednesday, and then the Orioles have a day game on Thursday. It is a 1:05 start for the series finale between the Orioles and the Red Sox. And it's not the worst commute to get from Norfolk to Baltimore, but it's not the easiest place to just fly directly to. It'll be the righty Tanner Houck going for the Red Sox against the veteran righty Charlie Morton, making his Oriole Park debut with the O's on Thursday afternoon for the rubber match of this series. That, I feel like at this point, is the only thing holding back the Orioles from getting Gunnar here, is just the timing of it all. Now, as I speak here on Wednesday evening, the Tides game is in a rain delay, and I believe the 6th inning. So it's possible that Gunnar could just, as long as the weather's okay, just kind of hit the road now and be subbed out of the game and start making his way to Baltimore. But I think it is also likely that they just say this would be too quick of a turnaround. We're going to Kansas City after the game Thursday. Gunnar, meet us in Baltimore. You'll get on the plane with us and you will head to Kansas City. We will activate you on Friday, and that is when your season will begin. So maybe they push that roster decision one more day down the road. Again, I'm more so hoping it's a Mateo DFA. I'm thinking it's going to be a Carlson option to AAA, and Mateo sticks around. But very good news that Gunnar Henderson is looking good to go. And hey, Grayson Rodriguez threw another bullpen on Wednesday. That is certainly good news as well. Just a couple of other things from AAA. Samuel Basayo hit a ball 115.1 miles an hour on a ground out last week. Now, he's just DHing right now because he's dealing with some throwing elbow issues. So he's not going to go on the IL, but he's not going to catch for a little while. He's just going to be the designated hitter for a few weeks. 110.3 was his hardest hit ball in AAA last year in those 86 plate appearances he got at the end of the year. So to go 115 is pretty impressive. Also had a 111.3 EV home run in spring. Also hit an opposite field home run on Saturday in AAA. It's just fun to watch him hit. Kobe Mayo had a nice day Sunday. 3 hits, 3 hard hit balls, including a homer in the 3rd inning. Hasn't really done much in the 2 games since, but you just want to see Kobe Mayo, who's getting option back to AAA, wasn't happy about it. You just want to see him perform well, and it's been so far at least solid for Mayo in the first few games in Norfolk. Best news, I think, besides Henderson looking good, is the fact that Colin Selby has already pitched twice in the Tide's first 5 games, so that is a good sign. Selby, who it was good late last year for the Orioles, was actually on the O's postseason roster as a right-handed pitcher out of the bullpen. Came into spring this year where it was like, hey, if a spot opens up, Selby's going to be fighting for a bullpen spot. And the spot did open up because Andrew Kittredge had the knee injury. He starts the year on the injured list. And we were thinking Selby's in the mix here. And then he had 1 bad spring training outing in his first spring outing in February, and he gets immediately optioned to minor league camp, and we didn't see him again in a major league spring training game. I was trying to figure out, is he injured? Is something going on? Are they working on something on the backfields? Well, the good news was he was healthy and active on the Triple-A Norfolk break camp roster, and then he pitched over the weekend. He threw an inning and a third scoreless on Friday, then a 1-2-3 inning with 2 Ks on Tuesday. Velocity is a little down across the board, but fastball 94 to 96, breaking stuff moved well. Maybe he is okay. Maybe it was just something weird going on and he's good to go. And he becomes another bullpen option for the Orioles to have in their bag because Selby's got some nasty, nasty stuff from the right side. Speaking of nasty stuff, Raul Alcantara, lefty the Orioles brought in on a minor league deal this offseason, has been mostly a reliever in the minors. The O's had him start earlier this week and he struck out 7 in 3 innings. He threw 37 sliders and 58 pitchers to go with 21 sinkers at like 94 to 95. Those were his only 2 pitches. And yet he did get 8 whiffs on 12 swings on the slider. That was pretty impressive, just to point out. Brandon Young was good in his season debut. 6 innings, did not allow an earned run. Young right now is potentially either him or Cody Poteet, the next option. If the O's had another starter go down, they might have to turn to Brandon Young, who was added to the 40-man roster this offseason. Kyle Brenovich, finally healthy. 7 Ks, 14 whiffs in 4 innings on Tuesday. That's cool. And then Cameron Weston on Wednesday, a pitcher I love in this system, a right-hander. Made his Triple-A debut Wednesday, 8 whiffs, 6 Ks in 4 innings pitched, and he got the start. Love the stuff. Fastball, slider, changeup from Cameron Weston. That was certainly good to see. Just some cool performances to begin the year in Triple-A from some guys who could potentially help the Orioles at the big league level at some point in 2025. But that'll do it for today's episode. We are back tomorrow for one final episode of the week, recapping the rubber match between the Orioles and the Red Sox. Remember, a day game at 1 o'clock, getting you an update on the Gunnar Henderson situation. Hopefully he can get to Baltimore and be activated on Thursday. We'll talk about the roster move that the Orioles make, and we'll get you ready for the Orioles' next series as they head to Kansas City to take on the Royals this weekend. But that's coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.